I now understood what had been to me a most perplexing difficulty, to wit, the white man's power to enslave the black man. It was a grand achievement, and I prized it highly. From that moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. It was just what I wanted, and I got it at a time when I the least expected it. Whilst I was saddened by the thought of losing the aid of my kind mistress, I was gladdened by the invaluable instruction which, by the merest accident, I had gained from my master. Though conscious of the difficulty of learning without a teacher, I set out with high hope and a fixed purpose, at whatever cost of trouble, to learn how to read. The very decided manner with which he spoke and strove to impress his wife with the evil consequences of giving me instruction served to convince me that he was deeply sensible of the truths he was uttering. It gave me the best assurance that I might rely with the utmost confidence on the results which he said would flow from teaching me to read. That which he most dreaded, I most desired. What he most loved, that I most hated. That which to him was a great evil to be carefully shunned was to me a great good to be diligently sought. And the argument which he so warmly urged against my learning to read only served to inspire me with a desire and determination to learn. In learning to read, I owe almost as much to the bitter opposition of my master as to the kindly aid of my mistress. I acknowledge the benefit of both. This pericope is taken from chapter 6 in the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, in which Frederick Douglass is shown a degree of kindness by his owner's wife, a degree of kindness expressed in the woman's beginning to teach Douglass how to write. At the time, teaching a slave how to write was an evil deed. Society at the time had been moralized to treat slaves in such inhuman ways that there was a real moral quandary surrounding the education of a slave. At least there was a moral quandary surrounding the slave owners that cared to teach their slaves. Indeed, not just a moral quandary, but a legal quandary. We learned from Yale University's anti-racism committee that in the early 1800s, the penalty for teaching a slave to read, or providing a slave with a pamphlet or any book, including the Bible, was 39 lashes if the offending party was a free black man, and $200, or around $4,500 in today's money, if the offending party was a white citizen. This puts in context not just the cruelty of the day against slaves, but also the instinctual sense of self-preservation that many white and free black people must have felt around this issue. Frederick Douglass makes the case throughout his narrative that slavery is dehumanizing, not just to the enslaved, but to the enslaving class. This is one such instance of that degradation, where morality is eroded by the base urge of self-preservation and social status. Even if Douglass's captor bore some personal grudge against slaves, there is the sense that educating a slave endangered the whole economic and societal balance of the day. Or as the popular work of Matthew Estes might have put it in his quote-unquote defense of N-word slavery as it exists in the United States, a markedly different approach from the economic analysis, but Matthew Estes would have said that white people had simply been ordained by God to look after the concerns of black people, because they, like children, had no capacity to look after themselves or determine their own needs. But beyond these varied reasons not to teach slaves how to read or educate them in any way beyond what they needed to know for their various duties, I suppose, it must be equally likely that Douglass's captor was motivated by his desire to protect his wife both from the social scandal of having an educated slave and from the legal liability of such an occurrence. And this obvious need to submit to immediate societal pressures allows Douglass to grasp that literacy, or lack thereof, is the cultural muzzle with which the slave owners of the time keep the enslaved mute, disorganized, and under their control. The enslaved are made malleable and compliant by the lack of ability to interact with the society they find themselves imprisoned in, and their lack of ability to coordinate with one another. So, Douglas rightly places emphasis on literacy because literacy is, in large part, the first instance of autonomy that carries your perception and cognition past your immediate appendages. Literacy allows you to conceptualize events, to abstract key themes from ideas. It allows you to learn and even teach yourself. It allows you to strategize. Literacy causes a fundamental shift in the structure of our thoughts, a shift that is never reversed. For better or worse, the biology of human beings seems to favor pattern recognition. We are so good at it that we share integral moments with each other through written language, and we have been for thousands of years now. Literacy is not an extracurricular or an optional product of vocation. It belongs to every human. It is a human right. Literacy, being able to read, is as essential as being able to speak a language. And Douglas's pericope conveys the excitement of this discovery with marked force. The eagerness with which Douglas's captor tries to suppress his education is the very thing that brings Douglas's attention to it. Douglas sentences the indictment of the systemic, enforced illiteracy of black members of society by presenting the morality of his captor and his own as being diametrically opposed. In this comparison, Douglas negates his captor's morality, that is, the common and contrived morality of the age, and his own morality, the morality of the oppressed. The horrid and twisted image of the common morality is so completely inhuman that to be immoral in 1800s America is to be moral by the metric of the Bible, and if we care to entertain the idea of natural law of human nature. But the slave-owning class have at this point suppressed and trampled the enslaved members of society by a suppression of education. And the practice has gathered momentum to the point that even the slave-owning class must dehumanize and degrade the enslaved. It is no longer enough to simply own a human, you have to torture them too. The slave-owning class has derived an apparatus for cruelty via the slave trade and practice techniques of abusing, demoralizing, and suppressing slaves that for any slave owner or even citizen to stand still, to not actively participate in the ongoing abuse of slaves, is to erode that apparatus and to endanger that delicate balance that we mentioned earlier. But Douglas ends by thanking his master for his discovery. Knowledge is knowledge, after all, no matter the means. But the irony and injustice of Douglas's words are piercing. Education is a human right. That Douglas happened upon its value by accident, and by the actual suppression of that human right, only adds to the layers of cruelty that were commonplace at the time. The pericope expresses that injustice while sharing the perspective and innocent excitement of Douglas. And I will end now by remarking that Douglas says in so few words what Rousseau took a book to say. That is, that literacy and the capacity to reason are equatable to one's freedom, or at the very least, allow one the capacity to pursue freedom. Literacy is to freedom as food and shelter are to a happy life. They are not sufficient for a happy life, just as literacy is not at all sufficient for freedom. But both are necessary for those respective ends. Thank you.